Okay, that's it for announcements. We've got Avon Waters here. He's a truly unique guy. I'm excited about what we're going to see. I have no idea what it's going to be exactly. You never know with Avon. Um, he used to be a reporter and he
Mm.
also was a photographer. But lucky for us, now he is headlong into art, his art. And he's going to do a demonstration for us. And he is in Indiana, northern Indiana. Is that correct?
Indianapolis Central now.
Oh, okay, that's right. He's in Indianapolis. You just got through telling me that. I don't know what else to say about you, Avon. What do you want to tell the folks before you get started?
Oh, well, I'm kind of new with Pastel, not as new as Pam, but I started in about 2016, I think. I had been an oil painter and had used a few acrylics from my teens and college years. Um, I was a working artist and painted on the weekends and things, but it wasn't until I retired and took up Pastel that I really my art just kind of changed direction. I went from primarily oil to pastel. So I'm glad you guys welcomed me here.
Okay. Avon is really all about being out in nature. Isn't that true?
Yes, I grew up around nature, and where we moved to in Indy, I've got nature on three sides of me. So there's a little nature reserve just out my front door, and the White River in the front door, and a lake in the back door. So
Nice. All right, I'm going to let Avon take it away, and I'm going to spotlight him so we can see his camera really well. There.
okay.
Okay.
Well,
Avon, I'd like to ask you, if people have questions, you want them to chime in or post it in the chat, or how do you prefer to handle that?
Um, I'm going to have my hands full switching pastel and dealing with wet medium. So if you want to shout out hey, we got a question in the chat, or somebody wants to shout out, if it gets noisy and we have to mute everybody, then if you would shout out the question in the chat, or they want to
Okay.
shout it out, I'll try to answer it as I go along. How's that?
Okay, let's stay muted, but if you have a question, you can unmute. Otherwise, if you put it in the chat, I'll call it
Okay,
out. Sounds good. All right.
perfect. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. I was telling Pam that how I really, really love this organization. I love the magazines and all you guys do. It's just like you're the premier pastel society as far as I'm concerned, and premier in my heart for sure. Once I joined, then it's just been marvelous seeing everything you guys do and participating. So I really thank you for having an interest, and I'll try to share with you what I've learned over trial and error. Um, and everything I've done has come from somebody else or trial and error. I'm constantly experimenting. So what I'm going to show you today, if you invited me back in 2 years from now, it might look completely different. I'll show you some of the materials that I use. I won't necessarily use all of them today, but it'll give you an idea. When I was an oil painter, I can't believe how much money I spent on those expensive brushes. And now I go to the hardware and I pick up these little chip brushes, and that's a hobby store brush. And I get these things are marvelous, these little half-inch chip brushes for what I do. So you'll see me use some of those today. I use this is one of my stables that I use all the time is Spectrafix, and I'll use that at various stages. There's three different ways I use charcoal. Today I'm going to use charcoal powder. This charcoal powder, I put a little bit in a yogurt cup and I add some alcohol and make a paste or something like that, and I put it on. I also use charcoal sticks to start my paintings and then use alcohol over that. And my favorite of all that I ran out is this little tube of nitrum liquid charcoal. And you just squeeze it out like a paint tube onto a palette. like that, and then you just mix a different amount of water with it, and you can create gray values for an underpainting with that. Um, my alcohol, I'm not too picky. I have used vodka. I have used Everclear. When I do workshops, I try to use the Everclear so that if anybody were to pick it up, they're not getting a dose of isopropyl. But 91% is what I like to use inside because it evaporates real fast. But if I can't find it, 70 or whatever I use. Um, One of my other favorite things to do is I keep a box of I keep a box of what I call stolen colors. And so when a new plein air magazine comes out, or one of the magazines that come out from the this Pastel Society, I go through it, and if I run across it, I get something that just stops me. The color just stops me. I will steal the color. I'll go and I'll take um, all these are stolen colors. So I'll go and I'll try to take a little piece of scrap paper, and I will sometimes just vaguely do whatever image it was in the magazine, and I will put the colors I use to mix those colors. So when I'm stuck, like what colors do I want this painting to be, then I'll pull this box out and I'll find me a palette, a color palette using those stolen colors. So this has really, really been handy. And I refer to it a little less because I've got some of these so memorized now. But when I first started in pastel, it was like, how did they get that color? How did they do that? And that's how I developed my own method of figuring out the color palettes. And then as I've studied color theory, um, some of those things became more automatic that, if I worked in this type of color scheme, like analogous or a split complement, then I have the knowledge here, and those color swaths I rely on a little less. Feel free to interrupt me. Now, when I first started, these are notebooks. There must be about 1,500 drawings in here, and there went some of them. These notebooks are my go-to. I will take a photograph, and what you're going to see when I switch cameras here is you're going to see, let me switch cameras and I'll show you the image I'm working from. Um, there we go. On the right-hand side, you see that I I have over here on the right-hand side, I have three images. Typically, I will draw 4, 5, or 6 images from a photograph. And once I draw from those photographs, these books are what I will go in and I make little thumbnail sketches. And those are my gray value studies. I've tried different things over the years. I've tried watercolor, I've tried sepia tone, I've tried pen and ink to just do the typical black and white notan. But I've tried even those pens that are different gradations of gray, but I'd leave the cap off of them. And the next time I got ready to do them, then the pen would be dried out, the gray that I wanted. So um, I just now So now I just take a little, I've got squares and I've got rectangles in the formats that I like to paint. I like to paint a lot of squares. And in the formats I like to paint, I just take these notebooks. These are 5x9 or 7x9 notebooks, and I'll make 3 or 4 of these little squares or rectangles on a page. And then when I draw from my photos or I'm out sketching, you guys saw me out actually wading in the water with waders on, with a tripod stuck in the water of one of the rivers in Indiana. And I actually it looks like I'm painting, but I was really sketching in plein air. So that's how I end up getting these, either from photographs on my phone, photographs that I have printed, or from plein air studies outside. and I'll do the first one in as the photograph is. So when I switch back here to the camera, you'll see this top right image is close to what the photograph was. Then once I've done that photograph as it is, then I start playing, and I'm not quite so precise with my drawing. I start playing, moving things around and playing with composition. So the second image there, you'll see that the image has changed from the first. There's some trees. There's kind of like in my part of Indiana, it's very flat. And I love these things I call tree screens because instead of having hills that intersect with one another, with rivers and valleys in my section of Indiana, we have these open fields. And so you get these rows of trees that the farmers haven't cut down, and they're becoming fewer and fewer. And what interests me is the spaces between the trees and the way the light either comes through them one direction or another direction, creating shadows. You look into behind them, behind this tree screen, and you've got this bright field. And sometimes that's what's interesting. Sometimes it's the trees on the other side of the bright field. So I'm going to switch over to the camera now and stand up and narrate. And I'm going to try to turn this a little bit so you can hear me speak. Shout out if you don't. And I'm going to get started on the actual painting process. Aha, I almost did a no-no. My computer came unplugged. Let me plug that back in, or we'll be dead battery. Okay. Can everybody hear me all right now that I've changed position?
We
Yeah.
can still.
Excellent. All right. So this one was from the photograph, and there's a few trees out in the back of this, but this one I wanted to emphasize those trees more. So my second drawing, like I said, I try to do between 4 and 6 to 8 of these things from a photograph. But when I did this, I wasn't looking at the photograph. Now I'm looking at the first drawing up here. So this is my drawing process. This is how I simplify things. I am trying to get it, make this to the average person still look like a landscape, but I want to get close to abstraction. So that's one of my personal goals. It didn't have to be yours, but that's kind of my working process. Is I go from all that detail to a drawing of the photograph, then from that drawing, all the other drawings come from that drawing. So I'm each time editing detail in and out, I'm moving trees. Down here, I moved those trees from the back up to this row of trees. And it didn't do anything for me, but I kind of like the values of this and the compositional Z of these subtle movements back and forth across the plane to get you into the field and then into this trees here. So I'm going to combine these two, and I'm going to create a drawing in charcoal first. And I'm going to use these trees and this field. So I'm going to use this line of trees. Now I move those back. I'm going to use those, but I'm going to mostly go with the values that are here. But I didn't like moving these trees up, so I'm going to take the trees and put them back on the other side of the field. So that's my goal. All right. Now, typically, this is a 12 by 12. I use any surface that is available to me. For bigger pieces, I've started painting on masonite and putting white gesso down and then putting clear gesso over that. And because the texture is what I'm after. I'm trying again. I go back to the fact I want to do as little detail as possible until I find a point that I want a center of interest, and then I'll sharpen it up. So I'm going to take a little alcohol and I'm going to stick it in this powder alcohol, and I'm just going to come in here. Now, typically, I don't draw the image on here I draw from the photographs, but since I knew I was going to be talking today, I kind of cheated and put a few little pencil marks in here so that I can talk to you and still get this reasonably done. So I'm going to show you how these two are a little bit different. I'll use the vine charcoal over here to create these images. And then now I'm going to switch to the paste and show you how that works for me. Now, I've got a little bit too much liquid in here right now. And you can see this is kind of runny. So we'll see. This may be just too runny. No, it's doing all right. But I use a small brush primarily to wet. And I'm going over the vine charcoal because it'll work better that way. But now you'll see that in the beginning, my trees are somewhat stylized, skinny, kind of not realistic. They almost look like they're all poplars. But you'll see when I use another wet technique with clear gesso, then you'll see how and why I keep them somewhat skinnier than what reality is. That's the other thing. I've ever since I was a kid and I watched movies, you know, Cary Grant and Holiday in Rome and things like this. You'd see these pine trees off in the distance, and I traveled to Spain, and they've got those kind of pointy little cypresses off in the distance. I just love those things. I photographed the heck out of those when I traveled to Spain. Now, I'm going to try to keep that field out in there. This is my fence line. This is the field because I want to create a highlight in there and a highlight. This is my 1/3 mark right in here. So I'm going to use the principle of thirds on the composition here with these foreground movements moving subtly through the field. So once I get the details, I switch to a little larger brush. This is my favorite, the chip brush. And I'm going to come in here and block in. What I love about the chip brush is look at those soft edges. Man, look at those soft edges. It's just wonderful how in the beginning when I started pastel, it just seemed like I had all these sharp edges. And as soon as I discovered an artist using these chip brushes, I just adopted it, and it's like that. It kind of set me free. I didn't worry about sharp edges. Even that drawing, you see, I used a pencil to get those sharp edges, and here I didn't. So it's nice to have the sharp edges in the beginning, but I like to think of, if any of you done figure drawing, I like to think of this as gestural landscape drawing. Um, if you're into figure drawing, then you'll remember that you had to go through gestures and do these little 1 minute to 2 minute gestural drawings to get the action of the photo. Well, if you're out in nature and you're doing plein air and you're doing these sketches, the action is really the wind, the sun, and the light moving. So you're really just doing the same thing as you would if you were a figure painter, but you're doing gestural drawings of landscapes. So that's kind of the way I look at it, is that these are gestural landscape drawings. Now, when I teach pastel class, I don't normally teach too much wet. I teach them how to use alcohol to block in. I try to convince the beginning students to um, use large shapes and refine down those shapes. But you know, each time I start one of these, it's different. Now I'm going to try to use some of the juice here, and I'm going to add a little more alcohol to another, because I don't I'm trying to go and get these values in, and this behind this row of trees in a fence row. Um, I'm going to use backlight. So by using more alcohol here, I can create a slightly darker value. And since I'm going to have this be my light coming through from this direction, and the sky overhead is always a little bit darker. The hues in the sky overhead are a little pure. There's a little less atmosphere up in there. So I'll color that in a little bit, but I'm not going to touch this area here too much. And I'll come down in here and grab some of this pastel, yeah, this charcoal, and darken this sky over in here a little bit. But anyway, people that are used to painting a little bit tighter than what this process is, this sometimes kind of drives them nuts. Um, and, you know, so if after I demo this, you just want to, don't worry about what comes out, because until you figure it out for yourself, I mean, what I'm doing isn't anything like the work that from the person that I stole the idea of these chip brushes from. So the idea is find new tools and play with them. I'm constantly experimenting with materials and trying to do new things. So this is about, now these are little skinny, ugly trees. You can see they kind of match these little skinny, ugly trees. And, but you're going to see these change quite a bit once I add color. Now, this surface, because I made it, I do this on pieces of scrap foam board too. For smaller pieces, like 12 by 12, if I had a piece of scrap 12 by 12, I'll use 12 by 12 foam board, put white, I don't need white gesso on it. I just put clear gesso on it. And I use these chip brushes for adding the gesso. And because the bristles are so rough, they're not even right here. I'll get some really nice textures, and it's not suitable for a lot of detail. But again, I'm after trying to keep it to look like a landscape, but walk up to that edge of abstraction. So now I'm ready to add some color, but at this point, I'm going to add it very sparingly. I'm going to add it very sparingly because if I apply it like I'm going to work towards a finish of a pastel at this point, I've learned that when I get ready to wet it, whether it's with alcohol or whether it's with clear gesso, I have to overcome that powder surface tension. And that makes it actually harder. So what I've learned is that once I get kind of these, I call them place setters, my light and dark place setters and my middle grade place setters. They're just place setters of where some of the colors are going to go. And I'll show you the palette I picked here in a minute. But I'm putting on gloves right now. I do this because my heredity is such that the men in our family, those pastels, whether it's summer or winter, especially the winter when the air is dry. And you folks in California, you have dry air. We have hot, humid air, but it's still, those powders will just make my hands will bleed if I don't wear gloves. So that's the only reason I wear these gloves, is so I'm not bleeding by the end of the day. Sorry to be so graphic.
Avon, we have a question.
Yes. Mhm.
Did you establish a color palette before you started?
I usually will do these drawings and then I decide the color palette, whether it's out of my stolen box or it's a good time to talk about the palette then. My color wheel, I had it up there earlier. Oh, there it is. Um, what I'm going to do this in, and the colors that I have selected, I'm going to go to this side here. I'm going to do red violets. I'm going to do analogous colors. I'm analogous for any folks out there that aren't familiar yet with color theory. Analogous are any 3 to 5 colors that are next to one another on the color wheel. So I'm going to try to stay somewhere in this area. I may dip over into here a little bit and grab a violet or something. Now, by using red violet as my center, then yellow green and yellows and yellow green can be what might be called the color that pops, the color that, in my highlights or wherever, if I reach the end of this today and then I want to put some light hit coming across some supposed clumps of grass or brush down in here, that's probably most likely going to be somewhere in this range here. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So now I'm going to sparingly um, I'm going to very sparingly just put, whoops, get me pale, get kind of a pale yellow. It's got a little orange in it. And very sparingly, very lightly, I'm going to stick a little bit of that down into where this highlight will be. And at this particular point, this is a place setter. Now, normally and when I worked in oils, we kind of always start with your darks and some people then go to the lights and join the two or whatever. I like to get a place setter in there because I've had this tendency when I'm painting. I don't know. Have you ever started with your horizon in the 1/3 mark, and then when you're done painting, the stupid horizon ends up in the center? I have a tendency if I don't put the place setter in something, then it disappears and I forget where it is by the end. So that's all I'm trying to do there. So, and I'm going to put a little bit of this. Remember from the color wheel, we had this kind of um, yellow green as our complement or our spice color. Now, at this particular point, I'm not too. This is a kind of a gray violet, um, and I'm going to stick that down in there. That blue will kind of neutralize some of that bright orange for now. I used to worry about at every stage trying to get my values to come into line with one another. And as I started using these wet pastels and things, then I decided, okay, I'm going to kind of ignore some of those values at this particular stage because once I add wet gesso to this, you're going to see how it will go a little bit darker. Just like if you were to spray a fixed leaf on there, wet gesso mixed with these dry pastels will do something similar. So I'm not pressing hard. There's probably I'm pressing hard enough that um, this is probably covering maybe 50% of the texture that's on there. And I don't know what it is, but I just love pink in my skies. The skies don't always turn out pink, but I can guarantee you, under whatever color they do turn out, there's probably been some pink in there. Anybody else do that? Have a color that just seems like it's right for the sky or the grass or something?
I like peachy apricot skies too.
Ooh, I like those too. I like those too. All right. Now, I'm going very sparingly with this. This is you can still see some of that charcoal coming through. And that's what I want. I don't want, that's kind of what I've done with the lights, but you can't see it as well because you're not seeing that kind of light color kind of come through there. through those lighter values. Now I've tried to stay in, I should have shown you my box.
That's a crazy shape. What kind of pastel is that?
Oh, that's one of those, what is it? Sommelier eggs. I've only got 2 or 3 of them of some of the colors that I use most in the darks.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
And they're great for things that are broad areas. But I am now. What's today be the day? I'm scared to death to drop one. I think somebody else, after these things came out, somebody else has started making. They don't call them eggs, but they've started making the larger pastels too. Anybody know? Stick it in the comments. Somebody share it with me. I'm sure I've read it or seen it somewhere. But look how, the colors are kept simple. I'm not trying yet to break these large areas up because until I get the texture on there, and I want to, before we get to the texture, I want to tell you why I like texture. When I first started, I learned mark making. And mark making basically is you put a bunch of little marks down, different width, different sizes, and then you find other colors that are part of the color hues, or you make contrasting colors that are the same value. You can create different effects by all these marks laying close to one another. Well, having been an oil painter and one that didn't use small brush strokes, but used big brush strokes and more impressionistic, having been that for so many years, mark making wasn't working for me. So what I did was, when I started discovering, this is a violet that I'm going to go in there and tone down some of those. The bottom of our trees have a little bit darker area, so this violet will mix with that. But so what I started to do was I started to discover that as I added more texture and started seeing the brush strokes of some of these wet materials I'm putting on, that those stuck up high enough, and by learning to control the pressure of my pastel application, I was getting, like, when you see here this red and this dark violet, well, after I apply more texture to this, those are going to be in the background. So now I've got a black layer from the charcoal. I've got a violet layer with this red going to be sealed in with the gesso I'm going to add next. So now I've got 2 to 3 colors before I even start adding dry pastel on top. So I'm trying to create multiple layers, and that texture, depending on how hard I press, will either fill with the color I'm holding or allow other colors underneath it to show through. So as I get towards the end, I'm barely sometimes just touching areas of this surface because I've got so many other layers that I want to show through. So it's my answer to how I could paint like an oil painter and use pastels and still get that layering you get with mark making, but I just wasn't successful with it. Okay. Now, bear with me a second. I'm going to grab me in my little cup. I'm going to grab me some gesso. This is my favorite gesso, Liquitex Clear. And this particular gesso, I've used Holbein by accident because I couldn't get this when I was out on the road once. And Holbein is works really, really well. It's a little creamier or something. I'm not quite sure what the difference is. But this stuff, if you haven't used it, most of you probably already know that it appears white, but it dries almost clear. It's got a little bit of a frostiness to the underneath. there's how much gesso I got out. Now, I'm going to grab another brush. I'm going to go to my chip brush here in a minute, but I like to, with the gesso, start with the lights, because as you get near the edge of, like here, this is that pale yellow. As I get near the edge of some of these other colors, I'm going to be dragging some of that other color into it. So this brush will become more and more polluted, so to speak, as I work with it. And at some point, then I'll go to the darks and work my way into the middle, and meet up with some of these lights. But you see, I'm not getting surface tension from too much powder. I've got enough gesso on here that it, it is mixing with the powder really well. And I'm going to come down in here. I'm almost to the point to my bigger brush. And in a minute here, you're going to see what happens to these trees because of using these brushes the way I do. Those little skinny, ugly trees will start to blossom a little bit. They'll start to uh, become a little bit fuller. So this particular process that I've developed really, well, it does two things. You know, when I first started Pastel, I kept hearing people talk about how Pastel has an immediacy. And I wasn't sure what that immediacy was. So the first thing I discovered was, oh, I don't have to stop and grab a bunch of tubes of paint and figure out how to mix this color. I just grab a different stick of pastel. Oh, that's the immediacy. It never hit me. All those years, people talked about the immediacy of pastel. And it's like, now I understand. It's so cool. But what I found, because I didn't get along with the mark making, and now I'm adding all these things, I've slowed the process of pasteling down. Some of these larger pieces will take days to do because I will do some wet. I'll do some wet things in the middle of this, as as the days progress. And I've got a, I've got a. My wife used to give me her old hair dryers. She would use them and they start making noise. So they they didn't have very much life left in them, but it wasn't long before everyone she gave me, every the hair dryer she gave me would burn out. So I went and I got this paint gun, and when you turn it on high, it'll melt paint and practically catch paint on fire on woodwork. So, but it had a thermostat on it, so I could use this paint gun and turn it on low, and I could evaporate and dry some of these wet areas. But even doing that, there's places where this gesso gets on so thick, and humps up from some of this brushwork that it won't dry before the end of the day. So that means I have to go to another project and start work on it the next day. Now, here you can start to see how these trees that are really kind of odd, can start to really blossom and take shape. And what this is also doing is, because I'm using analogous color palette, is all these other colors are related except for these yellows and oranges and greens that will be down in here. But even when I get into those, then they're going to create grays in some of these shadows. So you've got to, as I became more and more familiar with color theory and how mixing of these colors work, this really allowed me to think ahead about, okay, if I put this color down, then I go back over it with the complement that's on the color wheel, or the color that's next to it on the color wheel, an analogous color. How are they going to react? And that now look how much more interesting those trees are than those little skinny things that we started out with. But they still look okay. Do they look like realistic trees? Probably not. But can somebody look at this and say, wait a minute, that's kind of a landscape. Those are trees. That's a sky. That's what I'm after. I'm after that. I'm after that illusion and near abstractness. This tree is going to end up just a little bit somewhere further back than these. This fence line's coming this way, so that means that's a little further back. And with these off in the distance, I think we'll come up with something interesting there. I think. We'll see. No questions?
Well, I think it's hard to ask a question when you're sitting here with your mouth hanging open.
Like, oh my gosh, how's he doing that? I've had students like, I'll start out with beginning students, they'll take a look at what I'm doing and then I'll have a student come up afterwards and say, I know a little bit about color theory, and the way you did that, I didn't know how's he going to pull this out. Well, some of them I don't pull off, so this could be the day. I'm kind of liking that though. I'm kind of liking that.
I have to pick my jaw up off the floor first.
I usually do watercolor underpaintings, and then I do when that's dry, I use pastel ground on top and create texture with that. I think it's kind of what you're doing, but just did different.
Different process. Yeah, I've done watercolor underpaintings too. Now I'm working dry into wet, which is kind of fun because look how it breaks out. Yeah, those like I said, I experiment with all different sorts of things, and 2 years from now I may be doing something totally different because I am experimenting with creating some undertones with acrylic paints. And then when I get the surface wet like this, I'm going in there and striking out some areas and subtracting to show some of that undercolor from the acrylic. Now those paintings will be in, I can only use that type of painting as near as I can tell into like Pastel Plus because I'm wiping away enough that I'm probably not going to make the 80% rule. Rules, we gotta have rules.
Well, we've got a show for that, Avon. So Bonnie is wondering, how did you come up with this idea of using charcoal, pastel, and gesso as the underpaint? This is your underpainting, is that right?
This is the underpainting, right? This is where I would probably stop right now and I would dry this and let me take this off and tilt it and you can see some of the texture. Yeah, but it all started with a lot of Carol Strachan, I think, starts some of her paintings with charcoal, but I primarily remember a lot of techniques that I learned from Nancy King Mertz. She does a lot of charcoal underpainting. And then I just started mixing. I saw Carol do, sorry, Carol, I keep bringing your name up. I know she's probably choking on her cake right now. Cake. But I keep, I saw her work wet into some of these areas into I think where she had charcoal, and then she would take the pastel and work wet. So once I started needing more texture, and I put clear gesso on, sometimes I sprayed this with a fixative, and that will fix some of that color. And then as long as I don't scrub with the clear gesso, that Spectrafix will create enough of a skin that I can put texture over a finer drawing. So the folks of you that want something a little finer, try putting Spectrafix over your underpainting, pastel underpainting, and then put clear gesso over it to get texture. And you don't have to do the whole surface. You can just do an area. Uh, but yeah, that's how I think I just kind of, and I'm sure somebody out there's already been doing this, mixing it with the gesso with the pastel. But once I saw people mixing the charcoal and wetting it down and then covering it with clear gesso, or then adding color into that, using pastels into that still wet charcoal. When I started using the gesso, it was the same process. Instead of just charcoal and alcohol, I'm now using gesso and pigment. Does that make sense? So this is going to take a while to dry. So it's at this particular point, and I really like this one better than the one I'm going to bring up. I prepared for this. I took the same drawing and I took another painting, and I'll bring it up here now. It's dry, and we can, once this is dry, what I show you with this other underpainting start will be what I would do with this. But since you guys don't want to hear a paint gun go for the next 15, 20 minutes or 30, let's start with one that I kind of pre-did.
Okay.
See, no two turn out the same, do they? Those are the same colors because I set them out. I just used them differently. But you can see some of the same hints there. Now, I don't like this at all yet, but this is the underpainting. Once that one were to dry, I can go back in there and I can create, I can do what we're about ready to do here. Now you see I use a little bit brighter yellow on the last one, and I developed these trees with some blue violet and red violets, a little bit more. I got some oranges in there. This isn't at all right. It's at this point that I start thinking of color hues and color value. Once I get to this point, you know, this is kind of garish. You know, this is too yellow. This is, you know, there's no separation of trees. This little area, yeah, it's a little lighter in value, but it's not that gray mixed in there. That gray should be back there somewhere, not way up front. So now I'm going to work and start making selections, and I'm going to start to the process. I got big shapes. So now I'm going to use pastels that are in the same color hue family. So I'm going to go with reds, but the reds are going to be different hues. Well, they're going to be the same red hue, but they're going to be a different, they're going to be in the same family. Some of them will have a little more white, some will have a little more blue in them, some will have a little bit more orange in them. But I'll break these big shapes of trees. This looks like, right now, it just looks like a funky little shape. Doesn't even look like a tree yet, but we're going to have multiple trees coming out of this grouping. And then I like kind of my little pointed Christmas tree. I don't know whether he'll stay or not, but I'm going to create some separation here. I'm going to work on the sky. I'm going to work on the whole painting little by little. And now I'm working on values and breaking up the big shapes into smaller shapes. Oh, here, if you want to know, this is the Craftsman gun that replaced all those broken hair dryers. And you can see I've got a little mark here that tells me exactly where I match up the so I don't catch my canvas or my substrate on fire. This is unusual. I'm not getting, you know, when you're teaching a class, you've got people that are breathing or, you know, whatever. The silence is killing me.
Yeah, it's unusual when you're online. But we're here, we're
All
fascinated.
right, all right. I believe you, I believe you. It's just uh I'm not used to that. Now here's a perfect example. Watch what okay, I'm not going to use this colorway up here, but when I drag this color across here, um, you might not see it as well, but I'll do it in here and you'll see how the texture, can you see how with just a little bit of pressure, you see all those colors underneath showing through? That's
Yeah.
what I'm after. That bright yellow is showing through. I didn't press so hard. I can press hard enough that I obliterate that yellow, but I don't want to do that. I want some of that yellow to show through. And it's this layering of these similar color hues in the same family that are going to make these areas kind of pop and shine, at least for me. Now, if we got sun coming from here, this is where my plein air activities come handy, is I can find the edges of some of these where the sunlight would come through and create with this orange. Now here you can really see when I drag, look at all those darks that come through. To do mark making, I would have had to put dark, 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 medium, 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 then this color, mark, 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 mark. And this just lets me do it in one stroke. Try to break up the edge of this tree a little bit so that we've got another tree in here. This is part of the red violet family. I'm going to put some more blue violet back in there. I want to break up some of those trees in the distance. I'm just using the edge of it. And this comes pretty close to mark making. Those trees off in the distance, I want you to be able to sense that there's some shapes, some branches and things coming out. And by judiciously making some marks there, I'm able to create a semblance of, I'm sure that's the right word, but something that's more recognizable. And don't be afraid to use your fingers. Oh, was it you, Pam, that liked peachy skies?
No, it was Becky.
Oh, Becky, all right. Oh, I got to talk to you about this. I grabbed this because it's all dusty in my box, and I thought it was a regular pastel. This is one of those fluorescents. And man, I love these fluorescents, these Diane Townsend fluorescents. But has anybody used these and found out? Well, shoot, I'm looking right at the monitor. You can't even see what I'm seeing in person with this fluorescent. That does not photograph. You can only see what it does in person.
I got a set of them and they crumble when I pick them up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna crunch them up and mix some water and put them in empty pan pastels because they literally fall apart. And Tony Elaine has a really good set of fluorescents, but they're not Diane Townsend, and you can only get them through Jackson's in the UK, but
Oh.
they won't sell them in the US. So, yeah. Tony's got Elaine loves to drop in his Barbie pinks and stuff. But
And what's the manufacturer?
he's usually a unison guy, but I'm not sure those are unisons. I think they're a Jackson's art brand, maybe.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Back and look. But they're nice solid sticks and they don't crumble and fall apart. But he actually spatters them. He gets crumbles a bunch in his a little bit in his hand, and then he
And they,
picks it up and yeah, booms. Yeah,
boom.
exactly.
I saw him do that on, what was that thing? I think it was him. Was that him that made the kind of like yellow or orange explode when they somebody would work on a painting and then pass it down to him and they pass the painting along?
Yeah,
And he did that to one of them.
IAPS.
Yeah, Ajax, right. I mean, I'm kind of liking that kind of pale orange over that gray violet. That's, you're starting to see some of the violets come through. That's too bright. This is a real, this is kind of a muted red violet. And now the wet underneath there is showing through. Yeah, this fluorescent did not appear at all. But I mean, in person, it was like, it's like that grass was on fire.
Avon, what substrate did you say you were using? Is that
It's a scrap piece of masonite that I painted white gesso on. And then after that was dry, I put the clear gesso over because the clear gesso, it's kind of brown. And I tried one little piece trying to think, well, I would just cover in that kind of pale brown. And it was too hard to work on without making it white or some other color. So the white gesso gave me a surface that would show through underneath the clear gesso. It'll come through over the clear gesso. That makes sense? Sometimes I wonder if I'm rambling. Yeah, too dark for there.
So do you like the masonite because it is tougher and harder? Would you ever try this on a conventional pastel paper of any kind?
Well, I buy UArt 400 by the roll, and I used to use that, and then I ran out and I started using scrap board, and because I used so much texture, I was just filling in the sanded paper with gesso and texture. So I started wondering, well, can't I just create my own board because I'm not interested in a smooth surface, and that's why I've just kind of I've never reordered the roll after I ran out a year ago. I just use the reason I use masonite is I use masonite for bigger pieces of work, 24 by 24, 36 by 36. And those bigger pieces um, are they don't buckle, because I was using foam board when I put on like anything above about 11 to 14, I would start to get these cupping and buckling of those boards because I added so many different liquids. That answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
so Avon, could you explain again the reasoning for putting the clear gesso over the white gesso?
The white gesso, uh, the I have white gesso from oil painting projects. And I don't have white gesso with a pumice in it. So the clear gesso allows me to use the white to have a white surface, and then by using the clear gesso, I get something my pastels stick to better. So it's primarily because my white gesso doesn't have pumice.
Thanks. And have you also used Gator board as a substrate?
I have when somebody gave it to me, but I have to pick and choose still on how I make my money stretch. And so being able to just cover something that is inexpensive like foam board or masonite and use it as a surface leaves money for pigments and things like that that I really get excited about. I'm covering this up, so I'm not so excited about a gator board behind this. I don't know. Maybe I'm just selfish. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but there's tons of things already going on in here. These trees in the back. You've got just minute little areas where in that texture, some of that underpainting that you saw when I put this up there is shining through. Then you've got the light violet. You've got the red violets that are pale over the top of it, and this is even a different one that's got a little more blue violet in it. And I'm just using the end to kind of peck away at some of those areas. And so there's a ton of interest in this painting up close. And maybe at the end, I can move the painting or the camera in closer to it, and we can see some of those areas maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, that would be great. When you're painting, the camera changes the focus from the painting to your hand and back and forth.
Oh,
So
is it doing that?
yeah, so that would be good at the very end just to have just the
Just to
painting.
zoom in there and see it.
Yeah.
And just like the painting principles of oil painting, you use a color like this here. I use it here. I need to not very much maybe, but I need to get a few specks of it in another place in the foreground. Woo! Drop the pastel. Guess what? It stayed in one piece. I think this is my lucky day. After this, I'm going to go buy a lotto ticket. It stayed in one piece. I have no idea the time, so if we start bumping near the cutoff time, let me know and I can stop and move this in just a little bit closer.
Well, it's a little bit after 11:07. So
This yellow green in between those trees, because it's the complement of those, it's really making these trees that I wanted to get across there kind of show through. I stuck that in what would normally be sky holes. And that's the other thing on trees this small, when you control the pressure of this pastel, you are able to create sky holes without having to intentionally go through there and find them. Some of the randomness that occurs with this texture, you just could not duplicate by hand. When I first started playing with gesso on surfaces, I thought, well, let me just roll it on with a roller, and it became too even. Uh, you've had papers that have a texture on it, and you draw on them, and it's like sometimes it's just too even for areas that you want more random.
Avon, Carol is wondering, and do you know, will clear gesso hold as much pastel as pastel ground that has pumice in it?
Let's see, pastel ground. Um, Pastel ground that has pumice. Are you talking about liquid pastel ground?
Yeah, it's the Daniel Smith pastel ground, kind of built to put on top of watercolor.
I've never used that, so I can't answer that with any knowledge.
It's much more expensive than gesso.
Oh, there's why I haven't used it. That goes back to my, oh, the money only goes so far. Now I've got a little bit of blue, and I'm not pressing very hard because I just want to start to break up some of these bigger areas. I have not even attempted to put any stems of trees or anything into any of this. But we do know that our lights and our darks, you know, where things come to the meat, there's a bigger contrast. So that's kind of informing where I'm using this judiciously is down in this underbrush of this fence row. There's got to be some darks and lights hitting one another. And it is just too blue. I think you can see it almost appears out of place. And the reason it appears out of place is because all my values of these pastels that I've been using, they've been in the 4, 5, and 6 range. And I grabbed these two colors out of the 1 and 2 value range. If anybody's listening and they're not quite sure what I'm talking about, the grayscale that we artists tend to use is a 10 value range. And your darkest darks are in those 1 and 2, and these others are above middle gray. So that's what I'm talking about. Is the reason these things stick out is because I haven't covered them yet. They will force some of the 5 and 6 that I put over it to be just a little darker than their 5 or 6 value, and they'll cover up some of that really kind of ugly contrast there.
Well, and this is kind of turning that guideline on its head, isn't it? Of putting your darks in first and then going to your lighter values.
Yeah, I tend to start with the lights, as I said, as a place setter. And this particular painting, then I went from there to the really lights. But yeah, this one's a little more backwards. Sometimes I'll do this stage. I just happened to notice that. Remember how I said once this thing dried, this underpainting, and I picked up the dry one to start. This is when I start to break up the and try to bring my values of these things more into line with one another. So that's kind of happened, and I might have caught it earlier. So it's just happenstance that I went from light to dark all the way this time. Early on, I might have seen that, and I might have, not having been doing a demo or something, might have seen that and fixed it first. That I knew I needed some more darks in these large areas.
But it's working because of the way you've set it up. It works.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about, unlike oils. Another reason I think I just fell in love with pastel was there's so many oils that it's like, well, I gotta wait a week for that to dry to fix it. And now, I can just take a scrub brush and go in there and pull out what I want. And pastels have really just spoiled me. And the other thing, using my fingers on there, I've got a whole video on my tutorial channel taking a look at how blending with a gloved hand versus blending with a hand with a finger, blending with with a brush, blending with a brayer. All these blending techniques, they have a slightly, a beginner might not see the difference, but once you've done pastel a little while, you start to see some difference in using different tools for blending. So if you've never tried that, that's a good exercise, is just line up a bunch of blending tools and play with them. Now, if this painting was not working as well as it, sometimes I reach this stage and I just will run my hand down and destroy things. And other times I will take alcohol at this stage and put enough of it on there to break the surface tension that it starts creating drips and runs and in the sky and things. In the studio, I'm not afraid to do that. Well, of course, on a demo, if I did that, it'd be like, well, we're done for today, you know. So, um, and I really like the effect I can get with this gloved hand, and you learn how much pressure you can put on to move something up or move something down. Using the brayer is really good for creating little thin branches and things. And you learn with a brayer, if you take the side of it and you start in the light and come into the dark, it'll drag some of the light, like light hitting a bush in here. If you take the dark and go out to the dark over this light, then you'll get like a branch coming up. So this is kind of a precursor. Sometimes I would use the brayer at the end to create in these light areas, stuff coming up out of the dark into the light. I don't think we're going to reach that stage today, but now this color here is a blue-green, and when you look at the color wheel, it is not supposed to be in this analogous color. And sometimes I can test it because that green is the opposite. Now you notice I'm going over orange. So it is a complement to my, the green is the complement to the red, and the blue-green is a complement here in some of these oranges. So, and it's out of my values. I think I pulled that out of the value 6 and 7. So it marries well with what I've got down on there. And I can break up little spaces. I want to go sparingly because you know how in a shadow you got little speckles of light. I'm trying to capture that if I can just find the right value and the right color. But I have a tendency sometimes it's like, oh, that really is nice. And then I go crazy with it and then it's no longer nice. It's like, you know, a little goes a long way. Anybody else have that issue? It's like you get real excited about something and then you just go overboard.
I have all the issues.
That's half the fun of this, isn't it? I think this is a Geralt. I love Geralt because they're these round sticks. I want a set of these that were in the oranges. But again, if I tried to make all this little, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit here. It may go blurrier. But if I tried to create those individual little marks with a brayer or something, I had to mess up my camera view, didn't I? All right, let's get you focused again. Go back. But all these little areas down in here, just by controlling the pressure over that texture, it looks like little puffs of grass. In person, it does. That I could never get with a brayer or with another instrument. I couldn't, you definitely couldn't get it with by individual mark making.
Wow,
But
that's where
see,
you really,
this goes back to my experience with oil paints. This is what we call scumbling in oil painting, where you take you don't put a lot of oil or medium. You grab some paint on a brush and you lightly go over an area, and the canvas texture picks hits this. I call it skips and jumps. And so I recreated the painting canvas, but did it for pastels.
we call it scumbling in pastel painting too.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I thought I had heard that somebody used that, but this is without
Yeah.
the texture. You can't scumble and get that effect on a sanded paper.
No, that gesso really, you can really see that impact. Uh,
Now,
so just to
sorry.
clarify here, just sorry,
Uh-huh.
Carolyn and the pastel ground. So she was talking about a pastel ground made by Golden, comes in a plastic jar, it's thick, it can be thinned down and has pumice in it. So you can create this homemade surface. She puts it on gator board and gessoed masonite panel. A little goes a long way, so it's really not that expensive. And
Is it thick?
she said it's you can thin it, I guess. So she says
Okay.
it has pumice and it can take a lot of layers of pastel. She thinks maybe more than clear gesso even. So
Okay.
something to check out anyway.
Yeah, I use a lot of Golden products. Matter of fact, I've used airbrush medium. I've used Golden. I do like on my bigger pieces, like all these highlight areas. Once I know where they are and out in here, I do like to use Golden modeling gel that's normally made to build up impasto with acrylics. I mix my clear gesso with it. I'll mix it in, and then I'll stick it on here with a brush or a palette knife. And I've gotten 1/8 inch and maybe even more higher texture in some of those areas. Now, when I do that, I have to turn the piece flat. I got an easel, like a watercolor easel, turn it flat, and then you have to push the pastel down into all those grooves and get it and layer it that way, and then you can put it up and lightly, once you get the base color in those grooves, you can turn it up and uh, get some of that texture over all those ridges. So I have used modeling paste, and I've used some that have let's see. Yeah, here we go. Golden coarse pumice gel.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
So
So how many layers of pastel can you get on this gesso before you have to fix it in order to get, you know,
I oh, I've never filled it.
ah,
Um, I've
okay.
never filled it. I see how coarse that is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've never filled it. I've counted 17, 18 layers,
Yeah.
and I could still go. Now
Okay.
there are times in the highlights, just like in an oil painting, there are times in the highlights that I want to get a little bit more color variation because I've used too many layers of the similar hue. There's no contrast in that highlight, and I've had to go in with a just in that highlight and pull some out so that I release and can add some more in. That I've had to do, but
Mhm.
it's only because I piled too many of the similar colors in, and didn't know that, hey, I got to vary these things. Like I've got tons of variation in these colors right in through here.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, another technique I like to do, especially in highlights, is I like to use pure white. And the pure white, really what I'm doing is I'm creating shades. They say never to use pure white. But I think what they're really, when they say never, they're talking about, well, I want to highlight on that cloud and I'm going to stick a white highlight on it. What I'm doing with this, I like to alternate layers. So I'm going to put this pure white. I'm not filling up the grooves. I've got some of those pinks and peaches coming through. And there's some real nice texture here that's not even allowing me to get anything more than about 40% of the grooves covered. Now I'm going to go in with this pale yellow. I will, just when I find it. Now let me start with this pink. And then I'm going to grab a pale yellow out of my 6 or 7 value box. Come on, I know you're in there. Quit hiding from me. Now you see I got the pinks up in here. I've added that white, and by just scumbling over this just a little bit, some of those white little speckles are still coming through. If I press too hard, all I do is create a shade of pink or red violet. Now I'm going to get this yellow, and I'm going to try to put a little bit of it over that. And you probably can't see it very well, but man, the glow from this light is so much more than what I had to begin with. You can start to see a little of that glow because of that violet, and now I've got these yellow and red give me kind of a green, but it's a pale yellow green with that white underneath there coming through, those specks. And it is just vibrant in person. And again, a little goes a long way. So at some point here, I've got to get this married into the sky. There's some white up in there that is still white. But layering white over, then a darker color, then a paler color. By darker, I mean this is a darker hue value than this, but they are the same. They are relatively, turned to gray, and they're pretty close to one another. But visually, with our eyes, this red's a funny color. This kind of red pink, which is a tint, is much duller than this. But by mixing these white and that all together, oh, that's not my white, there's my white. By mixing the white and these together in different layers, really gets this intensity to really pop, especially when you put it next to a dark complement. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So how much longer would you spend on this before you considered it done, Avon?
I'm at the point where I would probably stop and stick it on I call it a fermentation wall. It's kind of like a writer. I was a journalist, and if I didn't have to turn a piece in, I'd stick it in the drawer, so to speak, and we'd see what it looked like the next morning.
Yeah.
And I may not do anything,
Yeah.
or I may soften some edges. But the only places at this point that there's some things missing. There's to get some of these stems of these trees, this still isn't reading as a group of trees, but I can see where those stems need to go. So I would probably do that still, for sure.
How would you put the, okay. I'd be interested in seeing what that looks like.
Well, I can do that. We got time?
Yeah,
Okay, here we go. I'm going to go to my um, box of, go to my box of value 3. Again, remember, I've been painting in the 4, 5, and 6 values for the darks, and the 6 and 7 for the lights. So because I'm using red, you know, sometimes we get highlights that are on trees, the grays of a tree trunk, or the color of a tree trunk is lighter, and another next to the tree next to it, depending on the kind of tree it is much darker. So I'm going to start with a charcoal, and I'm going to try to establish where some of these trees kind of come into this brush that's on the fence row. And I'm thinking we've got the edge of a tree here. Let me see if I can firm that up a little bit with a violet. Now, those are all too dark, but I want to come into here and play with some of these values, and I can break up that dark just by taking this red and going over and dragging through it. I'm breaking up that solid mass a lot. And that's a lot of times what I'll do with my dark tree stems, so to speak. Now, my light tree stems are kind of a challenge. This is a square, kind of a brownish red. And I chose it because, again, we're working in the reds. And the red violets. And I can go along that dark edge, and I can use that where that light hits that tree trunk on one side, maybe, in a couple places. But you can see it, my trees, they're kind of stylized. And people going after, you know, kind of the more realistic might not find that interesting, but I do. I mean, it's just kind of, it's kind of the fun of the game, so to speak.
Before we do leave, Avon, I want to see a close-up of the painting, and then also if there's some way you can show us your box, that'd be great, because you've been referring to your value this 2-3 box and your value that box, and we're very curious to see how you've got them arranged.
Yeah, Carol gave me the box idea, and I've seen since then, I've seen some other painters stick it in a box, but I think each artist has to kind of decide because there's 5 slots in our box. So rather than try to constantly keep the pastels separated into all 10 values, it's easier to try to just separate them. There's only one category in my box that is its own, and I think that's value 3. I typically put 1 or 2 other values in each one of the little slots. So as an artist, when you set your box up that way, and value painting has really made, I got interested in tonalism, and if any of you really get a chance to get the book by David Cleveland, American Tonalism, 1880 to 1920. Oh, that was a game changer for me to read about the tonalists and all the stuff that they did. That's a start of breaking that up. This looks a little bit more sensible now. It's got a little bit more logic to it. I think there's probably some crossover, some limbs that need to go from one area to another. I'll make those assessments. Those are kind of like those finishing touches where, okay, I'm going to put this pastel on here, and I got to get it right the first time, because if I screw it up, then I got to try to get the background color in and put it in a second time. So those little interconnecting things and trying to pull something up into here, because this kind of looks disjointed. And if you had a fence row here, you'd have either stems coming up or brush with no leaves on it coming up, or brush with leaves at the end. So marrying the fence row. So right now it looks like boom, 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 and then boom. So I need to join those with some sort of brush or weeds or weed matter or something. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to try to do some close-ups and then I'll show you the box?
Yes, that'd be great.
All right. Um, let's pull this up here, and I'm going to tilt this to see if you can see down in here where I use the wet. If you can see some of the layering that's going on. You've got the red, the yellow, and up in here you've got some of the charcoal coming through these red areas, and the same up in here. So this is the wet stage. This is the wash.
Now, would you use the Spectrafix Final Fix on the painting when you're done, or do you use that as a working?
I use that as a working medium.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes I will let the Spectrafix get on there and I don't put it on the whole painting. Other times I put it on the whole painting to create a film that then I can either put clear gesso over, or, and I've even started using it like when I paint on stretch canvas. When I paint on stretched canvas, I've even let the Spectrafix become a dissolving agent that I can take a rag or a tool and go in there and scrape off to see what my underlayer, like that wash I just showed you. If I were to dissolve the pastel and the finish, it allows me then to paint clear gesso over and fill more areas of the canvas with layers. But it also then dissolves that pastel where I can scrape some of those layers off and show what's underneath.
Okay.
All right. Tell me when you can see when it starts to go blurry.
Oh, well, that's beautiful there, just because, oh yeah, we can really see that texture more.
Yeah, I'll try to tilt it so we get
Yeah.
different. there. I think you can probably see a lot of that texture.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. But see how the layers, I think you can also see some of that layering in those trees in the distance, how I've got the yellows and the oranges and the original dark, little specks of dark from
Yeah.
that underpainting are still showing through there. And the
Yeah.
white, the luminescent of that white technique of layering white with a dark and a light, a darker and a lighter um, value in there. Down in here in the darks, let's see some of that. That's still in focus.
Yeah, it's best if you hold it close but still.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
So I'm having fun.
You sure are.
Yeah, I'm having fun. I'm going to turn this over. Oh, I'm not in my studio. I don't get in my new studio until September. So my wife has graciously given me her office to temporarily set up in for this demo. So I'm going to turn this around, and you may see family pictures and everything else, but we'll try to get it over here to. And I'll try to hold this still so it'll focus. There. Now you can see the box. I've
Okay.
got on the right hand side of your screen, I've got 8, 9, and 10 all together. Then I've got 6 and 7, then 4 and 5. Then number 3 is the only one that I put by itself, and then I put 1 and 2 in the far left. So, and anybody that kind of grainy stuff in between there, that's I've got a general store that I can get fine cornmeal, but they also sell coarse oatmeal, not oatmeal, cornmeal. So I'm using that coarse oatmeal, and as I go digging through there, it helps keep things clean. I don't have to be so pristine and wipe them down, and then 3 days later they turn out to be all black again.
Okay.
There's some
Strictly by
pictures.
value.
Sorry,
I said strictly by value, not.
strictly by value, right? That's really helped my painting, is learning to paint by value,
Mhm.
because the the by trying to paint by chroma, because I love color so much, I found that many of my paintings and most of my oils were just too gaudy. Some would argue that even painting by value, some of my paintings are too gaudy, but hey, I like them, so they must be an acquired taste, I guess. As long as I like them, I'm happy.
That's what matters. That's what they say, right? Paint what you
Yeah,
love.
yeah, paint what you love.
The rest will follow.
So,
Hey, and thank you so much for sharing your fun with us. What a treat for us.
well, thanks for having me. Anytime I can share with people, I mean, this stuff comes from everything from reading articles where other artists have shared things in journals and magazines, and demos like this, and talking to artists at events. If we don't share, we don't grow, or it becomes harder to grow. So if I left anybody out that's on that they gave me an idea, I apologize, because pretty soon all these things kind of meld together. But not much of anything I did there was anything really original. Everything seems to be done before. Somebody's done it, whether they've done it or not. They've done it.
Now, you paint plein air. Do you do finished pieces in plein air or you sketch in plein air? I know that.
I sketch in plein air, and I will go out and I will do some color studies in plein air. I was president of Indiana Plein Air Painters Association, and I always like to tell the folks when I would get up and have to speak that, you know, I really admire what they do because I can't do it. And I never really was very good at, if I got a plein air that was done well, it was just pure accident. I mean, you gotta you gotta, you know, do that a lot. But I learn a lot, I see a lot, and that's those plein air experiences. Even if you don't do it well, go do it, because you'll remember what the light was like. You'll remember what light reflects and how the shadows are shaped and things like that. When you get in the studio and you start, especially, you saw how I work from just drawings after the initial photograph. I work only from the drawings, so I'm relying on those memories of plein air experience.
Okay, great. Well, Julie says, I think your use of color is wonderful. We have such beautiful color choices with pastels, so let's use them. And she thanks you for your time. We all thank you for your time. And we love learning about your approach. So thank you for sharing with us. And thank you everyone for joining us today. This will be recorded and we'll post it to our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to revisit, I know I'll probably be revisiting. Thank you so much, Avon, and we'll
Thank
see
you.
you again. Okay, thanks everyone for joining. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.